Hello and welcome back. We are going to read Girlcott chapters 3 and 4 this time. I had walked for 15 minutes and reached Victoria Park on Cedar Avenue before I realized I hadn't called Mama. Even doing Scout's pace, 6 running and 6 walking, I would never reach home before dark. Mama constantly reminded me that a bad reputation had no good resurrection, so I was never allowed out after dark without responsible company. But on this occasion, I would sooner face a storm of Mama's wrath than go back to the Wallaces and beg to use their telephone. The sun had dropped down behind the horizon, and gray shadows crept along the avenue, transforming the tall, majestic cedar trees into creatures with long, grasping arms. I tried to walk faster, but my saddle shoes felt as if they were sprouting roots. Before I could drag my frightened body a few steps, I heard a motorcycle chugging behind me, almost on my heels. My heart pained as it pounded against my chest. If only I could kick off those old saddle shoes and run. Then I heard a giggle. Kiki, kiki, kee, like a kiskadee. I knew that sound. I swung around and Eileen was leaning over the handlebars of a motorcycle, her bird-like giggle escalating into hyena laughter. Did I scare you? With one swift motion, she rested the motorcycle on its stand and hugged me until my breath almost left my body. What happened? You look terrible. Why are you walking home anyway? Nothing happened, I gasped, pushing her away gently. There was no way I could put the event of the Wallace's bite to eat into words. I decided to take a stroll home. Eileen's head almost went parallel to her shoulders and a dimple popped into her cheeks. A stroll home in the dark? Something must have happened at the Wallace's. Auntie Dora said you were to call her when you were ready to come home. I don't want to talk about it right now. I have to work something out, that's all. My eyes moved from the motorcycle and back to Eileen's face. This was her older brother's Benny's bike that he never let out of his sight. 2 years ago, he had bought an old wreck off a friend and Papa fixed it up to look like a brand new motorcycle. Benny doesn't know I have his bike, Eileen said, answering the question in my mind. I had to take it while he was sleeping and I have to get it back soon because he has to work tonight. You're not supposed to be riding that bike without a license. Suppose the police catch you. Eileen ignored my question. I went over to your house about the invitations for Saturday, and Auntie Dora said she was going to pick you up from the Wallaces as soon as you could. I told Benny and I would get you, so here I am. Without Benny? I told you he's home sleeping. I had to get you myself, so hop on. Eileen raised the motorcycle off the stand again. She had not turned off the motor. I've got to get you home and then get the bike back before Benny wakes up. Auntie Dora doesn't have time to find out that I came alone on his bike. Let's hope she doesn't find out, I sighed as I eased onto the back seat, trying to arrange my skirt and crinoline so that I wouldn't be displaying myself as Mom always warned about. And the ride could at least be comfortable. I knew Eileen could handle the motorcycle, for she had already had enough practice sneaking it out when Benny was not around. But she had no license. We finally reached Loquat Lane and Eileen rode the bike up the drive and stopped a few yards from the back door. I leaped off, almost landing in Mama's kitchen garden of parsley and thyme. Here, Eileen handed me a folded piece of paper. She pulled out of her shirt pocket while I scrambled to save my balance. What's this? The names of the people for the party in the movie. Remember, you need them for the new invitations. I did not open the paper. I sensed something was wrong, and today I'd had enough. How many names was all I asked, my heart thumping against my ribs like a caged animal. 2, Dedrick Smith and Hugh Hawkins. Those 2 horrible clowns from the class. What about the others? Are you sure you didn't miss any names? I'm sure they all had some excuse. The same excuse. What excuse? I couldn't see George Strong making a lame excuse, so I held my breath and waited. News about that theater boycott. Seems like it's to start on Monday. If that's the truth, we won't be able to go to the movies. My first impulse was to crush the parsley and thyme with my bare hands. But one of my strong points is self-control, so I covered my face and sighed silently. When I looked up, Eileen was looking at me with pity. We'll work something out, I said. Nothing was going to spoil my party, but my thoughts did not convince me otherwise. Good for you, Eileen looked relieved. Even if it means putting this whole problem in an equation, you'll find the right answer. I knew she was trying to cheer me up. You better hurry home and don't get caught. I said, not wanting her to get in trouble with Benny or worse still with the police for riding without a license. I'll sleep over tomorrow night. We can work on the party, she said. Everything's going to turn out right. You'll see. I opened my mouth to agree, but no words came. After I could no longer hear the motor, I leaned against the cool wall of the house and closed my eyes. Everything around me seemed the same, and yet I felt different. I tried to dig deep into my mind to find some clue that would explain why I never noticed how the Wallaces really felt about me. Why I never noticed that colored people were angry because they were segregated. My parents never showed that they were unhappy with the way we lived. The math side of my brain knew there was a problem, but it also knew that I was going to come up with a solution that would not spoil my birthday plans. I opened my eyes, straightened up my shoulders, and slowly walked into the kitchen. Chapter 4. Holding my breath, I stepped into the kitchen, hoping that Mama would not notice something that was amiss. But Dora Johnson never missed anything. I didn't need to worry, though, because Mama's back was turned to the door and she was talking to our next-door neighbor, Mrs. Charter, who was seated at the table, a plate of tuna casserole in front of her. Good evening, Mama. Good evening, Mrs. Charter. I'm glad Benny brought you home, Mama said. Is he coming in to get something to eat? He couldn't stay. He has to work tonight. Mrs. Charter's head snapped up from her shoulders, and she grinned at me, oblivious of the squashed peas between her front teeth. Desma, my child, you have a boyfriend at last? Well, I never thought I'd live to see the day. Tell me about him. Is he good looking? Benny is not my boyfriend, Mrs. Charter. He's Eileen's brother. I tried to escape from the doorway and out of the kitchen, but our good neighbor held me hostage with her nonsense. Oh, that Benny, that light-skinned, good-looking boy? You wouldn't go wrong marrying somebody looking like him. That whole family is easy on the eyes, even that little pretty friend of yours. Hortense, would you like some more on your plate? Mama interrupted, giving me a wink. We both knew where this dialogue was going, and the way my face was puffing up like a swollen frog was enough warning for Mama. I hated when Mrs. Charter compared my looks to Eileen's, and that's just what happened next. If only I could escape. That friend of yours is so good looking. She's going to have a lot of chances for a husband, but you... Hortense, your food is getting cold, Mama tried again. Desma has a lot of time before she's interested in marriage. She's only 16 and her mind is set on going off to college. Dora, I was married at 16. I had to get permission from my parents. Her voice quivered. My poor late husband, I was married to poor Herbert for 32 years when the good Lord called him to his reward. Now was my chance to escape. I slipped past Mrs. Charter, past the kitchen table, and past Mama, and out of the room before I could be asked about my visit to the Wallaces. That daughter of yours is getting a lot prettier now that she's growing up, I heard Mrs. Charter say to my disappearing back. She's not so plain anymore. When I entered my bedroom, I gazed at the 3 pictures in matching cedar frames above my desk. First was Marian Anderson, the colored singer who people said had a voice that would be heard once in a century. She was not allowed to sing at Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C. because of her color, but President Roosevelt and his wife, Eleanor, invited her to sing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial instead. The next picture was Albert Einstein's. Not only was he the greatest physicist of our time, but he befriended Miss Anderson and invited her to stay at his home in Princeton, New Jersey when she was there for a concert and was turned away from the hotel. The third picture was of me sitting on my brand new blue mobilette. Benny had sketched the picture when I received the bike as a birthday present from my parents. Although I could not get a license until I turned 16, Papa allowed me to try it out in front of the garage. Benny had the picture framed to match the other 2, and Eileen said I looked as if I were riding into the future. Looking at all 3 pictures, the first taken from Ebony magazine, the second from Time magazine, and the third a watercolor sketch by Benny, I no longer felt inspired. They had a fuzzy effect, which made me think of that blind man in the Bible who saw men as trees walking when Jesus first healed his blindness. The picture of Marian Anderson stared down at me. The clue had been staring me in the face, and I had missed its significance. If I'd paid better attention to the story, I would have been better prepared for the Wallaces. Mrs. Charter's loud voice penetrated my thoughts, and I flopped down on my bed near the window and put my hands over my ears. But her words pushed through the barrier of my fingers. I used to have a figure like hers when I was young, she was telling Mama. Not that again. Despite my sad feelings, I began to giggle and I listened in spite of myself. My poor late Herbert always admired my shape, she said loud enough for the whole world to hear. I must have been 7 when I first remember hearing Mr. Charter as being the late husband. Mrs. Charter was sitting in our kitchen just as she is now, devouring a huge fried chicken leg, the skin peeling away in large, noisy bites. I had looked around, wondering why her husband was taking so long to pick up his wife before she ate up all her food. I asked Mom about this, particularly since I had never laid eyes on her husband. Mama had choked on a laugh, then later explained that Mrs. Charter meant her husband was dead. Late was another way of saying he was dead. I never asked about Mr. Herbert Charter again. It was at that age I realized how confusing the English language was. I was learning arithmetic and discovered that a 7 is always a 7 and never any other figure. I noticed that other numbers were what they said they were, even the millions and the trillions. Yet in English, a dead person could be described as late. Dead people and late people were not the same. So why make them so? I ended up preferring maths to English because it was less confusing. The conversation in the kitchen was droning on, but I was no longer able to hear what Mama and Mrs. Charter were saying, and I was no longer interested. My concern was that Eileen and I had planned to work on the invitations for the movies, but now she couldn't stay overnight, and we didn't have enough names anyway. I closed my eyes and soon fell fast asleep. When I awoke the next morning, a soft breeze was blowing into my open window, and a bright orange sun splashed its colors across the east, dividing the sea from the sky. I untangled myself from the sheets and knelt down by the window to watch the geometric phenomenon that convinced me that nature too enjoyed maths. In an hour, the red ball of sun would shrink into a small golden circle and remain that size until sunset, and then again be transformed into a large crimson ball. Desma, are you saying your prayers to the sun or what? I swung around to see Mama standing in the doorway, a dish towel over her arm. Do you know what time it is? Usually on a school day, I was up and ready, but today was not only Saturday, but I had no more exams, so this was a free day. Or at least it was free until Mama reminded me of my chores. Gee, I haven't done chores for so long, I forgot. I shoved my feet into my slippers beside the bed and shuffled toward my closet. Mama stepped in front of me and held both of my hands. What did Mrs. Wallace want to see you about? I hesitated. Is everything all right? What happened? Mama squinted so that 3 lines appeared on her forehead. Nothing much happened, I said. I had a bite to eat, and then she asked me about looking after Fiona since I finished high school. Mama's back stiffened. Doesn't she know about your Oxbridge exam results and that you stand a good chance of getting the Empire Scholarship? I didn't tell her that, Mama. I just told her that I had other plans, and that was that. Mama stared at me for a long while, and then she hugged me close. We sat down on the bed, and she reached for my hand and squeezed it. Her voice was barely above a whisper, so I leaned in close, my head on her shoulder. The Wallaces are like a lot of white people in Bermuda, she said slowly as if weighing each word. As long as colored people are smiling at them and not challenging the status quo, then they can show off to tourists that this island is paradise. I thought about what Mama said and shook my head. I couldn't figure out what she meant. What's that got to do with the boycott, Mama? Everything. A boycott usually ends up in a riot. But the boycott might not even happen. It's just a rumor. Everybody knows that. I was trying to convince myself and hoping to convince Mama too. This conversation was beginning to get depressing. I'd had enough of the Wallaces. People like the Wallaces are getting concerned now. It was as if Mama had read my mind. Her voice was no longer soft and had gotten hard as if she was angry. People have been punished for speaking out. How? I couldn't think of anyone being punished for speaking out. Maybe my turning down the job at the Wallaces was what she meant. Mortgages have been pulled in so that people lost their homes. People even lost jobs. Did you and Papa ever have problems with white people? Instead of answering, Mama gave my shoulders a squeeze and pulled me up from the bed. Let's not get miserable about something that might not happen. Get dressed and go down to your Papa's garage. He might need help with his books. You haven't done that for a while. Before leaving, she said, anger is sometimes more hurtful than the injury that caused it. As soon as she left, I sat down on the bed and buried my face in my hands. I remember stories Benny told Eileen about me about people being beaten, lynched, and even chased by vicious dogs because they fought against segregation. He had gotten those stories from a friend who worked on the Queen of Bermuda, a ship that sailed back and forth to the United States. Eileen had asked Mrs. Goldenrod about those stories, and she said they were true, but our government never published them because they never wanted any unrest here. We decided to check the recorder in the Royal Gazette, but neither of the newspapers mentioned unrest in the United States. Did this mean the progressive group was from the United States? I hope they were just a rumor. I would never be 16 again, and this year had started to be the best year ever. Should I feel guilty because I didn't want a boycott to spoil my birthday celebration? With all that had already happened, my life was sliding downhill fast, and I couldn't figure out how to put the brakes on.